So, guys, what's the inspiration of Late Night with the Devil? Because you kind of took us back to the 70s variety talk show host era,
Yeah.
which was fantastic.
Yeah.
So, what was the inspiration for that?
Well, we sort of are old enough to have remembered a little bit of the 70s and all of the 80s. And it was just, I think it was a bit of a golden age for the talk show, the American stuff in particular. In Australia, we had our own talk show hosts. So we'd grown up, staying up late to watch that stuff way past our bedtime to watch, this very adult content. And this was the day when, the talk shows were a lot less scripted, I think, than they are today, a lot less sort of stage managed, and people could say what they think. And there was always a sense, especially when they were actually live, that something could go wrong at any point. And it often did. So we felt that that was already just an interesting, a real tense, anxiety-filled sort of space in which to set a horror film or any story really. So then we thought, well, how do we bring the horror to that world?
Yeah.
And we thought, well,
But I think also, we've always been keen on real-time storytelling as well, and obviously, a live TV show lends itself beautifully to that kind of narrative pacing. So yeah.
And was there any real life talk show host or kind of episode that kind of helped fuel this story behind Late Night with the Devil as well?
Oh, plenty. I mean,
yeah. I mean, Cole referred to one of our guys here in Australia back in the 80s, Don Lane, who was a big influence on the writing of the film, but also I think on David's characterization as well. But look, initially we were sort of just kind of watching lots of Dick Cavett, lots of Johnny Carson, and that was kind of the starting point, I think. And but as the script developed, as the world developed, maybe it drew more upon our own, Australian hosts and that world we knew so well growing up.
Because back in the 70s and 80s, I think people were a lot more, is gullible the word? But, not quite as cynical as we are today. And, if you had someone claiming to be a psychic or, the spoonbender, Uri Geller, that sort of character, they were welcomed onto these shows and treated at face value. There was no critique of them. I mean, Johnny Carson might have, but in Australia, our guy, Don Lane, he lapped it up. He believed in all that stuff. He was heavily into the paranormal and the psychic. So that was fascinating. As kids growing up watching that stuff, being presented these characters and their beliefs as if they are for real. I think that's left its mark. And that, sort of going back to your question, sort of why it felt like it was a natural fit to bring in the horror elements to it.
And how was the casting process like? Especially with David, because he's been in a lot of stuff recently, but he's usually the background actor in a lot of these. And this film is probably a career-defining moment for him, and probably his best performance as well. So, how was it like getting him in the lead?
Look, yeah, it happened pretty early on. We when we hooked up with Roy Lee, producer, and Stephen Schneider. Obviously discussions started happening around who would be cast as Jack. I read an article in Fangoria that David had written about regional horror hosts from 60s, 70s, and 80s, and obviously we already knew David's work, but then just to find out that he had an interest in this world and was really obviously passionate about genre films as well. That just seemed to make a lot of sense to us. So fortunately, Roy Lee already had a relationship with David, knew David, so got in touch with him very quickly, and it all kind of, happened from there. Within the sort of space of a couple of weeks, once he'd read the script and saw our lookbook, he was totally on board.
And how do you guys feel about this coming to theaters as well? Because that has to be so exciting for a movie like this to be seen in cinemas with a large crowd as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, last year, AJ, we played at a lot of festivals, to big rooms, and it was such a buzz because we were always hopeful that in a cinema, if you had enough people in there, it would feel like you were a part of the night, that you were actually there on the night of the recording of the show. Because there are times, I think, when we've sat there and watched the film with a big crowd, and there are times when you're not sure where the sound is coming. Is it coming from the actual audience, or is it from the audience in the film? And at one point, and then there's a point where it doesn't matter because they're all enjoying it together. So the fact that that's now going to happen, across, the US of A is pretty exciting for us. Yeah, it's a real buzz.
Yeah, I think the last film we had released here was 100 Bloody Acres. That got released theatrically, and I think we managed to get on 6 screens.
Yeah. It's very thrilling for us. Yeah.
And you got one of the top horror genre people on board with this in Sutter as well.
Yeah.
So how was it like having them back this project up at Arso?
Amazing.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
They've been so great to work with. We've got Shutter in Australia as well. And it's so wonderful that we have a platform that is dedicated solely to horror. And we were absolutely chuffed when we found out that they'd be releasing the film.
And what are you looking forward to most out of audiences getting from Late Night with the Devil?
AJ, just a good old fashioned night at the movies. I think, there's enough laughs and scares and twists.
Yeah.
That I think, and plenty to talk about, after the credits roll.
Yeah.
I think, on a kind of, more subtextual level. But I think just expect a really fun romp, and I reckon you're gonna get your money's worth.
Yeah, and it's a sort of film I think that the horror fans have been enjoying and we've got the sort of the stamp of approval there. But I think even if you're not into horror and you're not too squeamish, you can enjoy this just for as a great, hopefully, piece of drama, of storytelling, because I think the characters are all pretty engaging, and with David at the helm there's a lot to like in that regard as well. So it's not purely for the horror fans. We like to think it's a film you can take your parents to if they're not too squeamish and don't have vermophobia.
All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us in Infamous Horror today. It's been all fun and congratulations on Late Night with the Devil.
Thank you so much,
Thanks,
AJ.
AJ. Good on you.